Hi everyone, welcome to the Hands-On CISO podcast. My name is Adi, and today we'll be talking to Marc Throne. Marc is a highly experienced CISO with a strong background in strategic leadership and information security. With over a decade of experience in the field, his expertise lies in risk assessment and mitigation, security program development, compliance, incident response, and third-party risk management. Marc holds multiple certifications and has a proven track record of successful security leadership across diverse organizations. Marc, I'm super excited to have you here today and hear all of your opinions and thoughts about the cybersecurity world, about being a CISO. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me and giving me the opportunity to, talk about some experiences and help others maybe get into the field or not. Depending on how they do
it. Or not. Interesting. Okay, so I think before anything else, tell us, how did you get started in security?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. I like to find anomalies. So finding that needle in the haystack. So when I was young, I liked computers, and I'd always, for some reason, I would watch things scrolling across the screen, and I would be able to see anomalies. It sounds weird, but that translated into looking at logs and finding things that were hidden. And I had a person that said, "Hey, you would be great in security," because that's what an analyst does. And then also, my father was military intelligence, so kind of following in his footsteps, I think I got the intelligence bug / security bug from him, I like to say. So when we were young, the military, I'm still surprised they allowed it. They had a bring your family to work day. We were in Seoul, Korea, and that was my first experience with my father, what he did in the military. And we walked into a building and signed in, and then he had to stick his hand into this box, obviously key a number or do something because it was hidden. First door opened, and then we went in and went down, and then they did an eye bioscan. So he had to put his eye up there to get into the next level down. So all of this stuff, it's as a kid, it's wow, this is cool. This is James Bond stuff. Finally get down into the bunker, I called it, because it was 3 or 4 levels down. And everything was, it was just computers and desks. And me being, a 9-year-old, I'm inquisitive. And, there's drapes or blankets on the wall. And, of course, I pull it back. And that's the only time I got yelled at. So 25 years later, which is about 10 years ago, I asked my dad what it was. And it actually was a map of North Korea and little dots on where they had assets, intelligence assets on the ground. So I was seeing some highly sensitive information as a little kid that I...
Interesting.
So that's kind of my first foray in where I'm okay, this is really cool. Let's pursue it. So I think that's where I got the bug.
Wow. And what was the first practical move, because that was when you were really young, right? Like a little kid. And then what happened from there?
So back in the day, getting into the security field was a bit tough. So what I did was I had the opportunity to work as a hardware repair technician for Ameridata, which was a very big company way back in the day, Compact. And they had a lot of free training. So what I would do is I would bust my butt, get all my repairs done, and then I would sit and I would focus on the security training. And when I left there, I had taken so many courses. I was pretty much certified in everything. And moving on from that got my foot in the door as an analyst. So moving from there, getting in, and then actually talking to somebody and proving that, I kind of had the passion and the knowledge for security. But it still took a while to actually get into an actual security position. Because back in the day before today, it was, okay, yeah, we don't need any security people. We got enough, right? This is a tight-knit group. and you got to prove yourself type of thing. So it took me quite a while to get in. And it was, I think what ended up finalizing it was I was doing forensic analysis as a side job, restoring artifacts for people at hard drives that had crashed and things like that. And I had done it for one of the employees or coworkers who was friends with the security guy. And then when he found that out, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, okay, Mark is not just talking the talk, he can do it. So let's see what he can do. And then I moved into that position. And then part of that, probably getting ahead of myself here, but also I moved around on purpose, because I wanted to be a CISO early on. And from my perspective, I have not seen a company where you can get the breadth of knowledge that you need in all the different areas by sticking with one company. As sad as that sounds, right? When you get someone that is good at a certain thing, companies tend to pigeonhole them into that area, right? And for better or worse, that's what tends to happen. So early on, I jumped around. I kept my ear on the ground, right? Answered the recruiter calls and was just looking around. Okay, what do I need to do next? Okay, what do I feel that I need to improve on, right? AD, risk management, things like that, right? Risk assessments, things. So I would look for different positions that would offer me that opportunity, right? And then I moved around. There's a bunch of different views on that, though, right? I've had some people say that they don't like it because it makes you look like a job hopper, and others kind of get it, where it's like, yeah, okay, I can see the progression, right? You're not job hopping to the same job. You're increasing responsibility, you're changing to a new thing, and you're becoming more well-rounded. I will say that was the rarer view, let's say. So
That's interesting. I think, most of the CISOs that I've spoken to do have that view also, though, that I think one of them put it really nicely, that like the chances that you grow and the company grow at the same pace, the same time, is like, it's very low. Like, most likely the company is growing a certain way. They need something, maybe something that you wanted to do before, or maybe something new that you don't want to do anymore. And it's like, that's kind of the way you become a better security person. You do different things, and if you're already if you have all the knowledge to do your job, then you're probably not growing much.
Yes, that's a good way to put it.
Interesting. Well, do you think, has anything surprised you, like when you, from being a little boy who's like, wow, all of these James Bondy stuff, and to, having some experience in the field, like, is it the way you would think it would be, or is it different?
So I think it's a bit different. And that kind of goes back to my initial comment about, do you want to be a CISO or possibly not, right? It's definitely harder to influence a senior executive that doesn't have a positive view on security, right? And that becomes a big challenge. And I think the larger organizations suffer from that more so than the smaller organizations. I will say that in the beginning, before all of the ransomware got everybody's attention, it was a different animal in that people weren't really thinking about security, and you are walking that line of, okay, is the fine less than the tool that it costs, right? And that's quite common. And for me, that's, it took me a few minutes or a little while to come to terms with that. It's like, okay, is that not the whole reason why we are in the position we are currently, is because of that view, right? Pretty much everybody's data is already out there because of that, right? For me, it was a bit difficult or I guess I didn't expect having a lot of the pushback from the IT department, I would say. From my perspective, I'm seeing a lot of pushback from IT versus the business. And I think that partly might be because of the way I approach it. I make friends and I like to think I align with the business much better, which then puts me on the opposite side of IT. So it's a double-edged sword. So, yeah, there's a lot of challenges.
Do you think the CISO role is more of a very business role, or should the CISO also be very techy, or is it really so different between different companies? Because I hear so many opinions about this question. Like, some people are like, security is so much more business. It's definitely business. And some people are like, no. It's like mostly technical. And then a lot of people also say it really depends on the company. So I think it's interesting for me to hear your perspective, because you've been, in a few companies and you've seen different things. What do you think about that?
Yeah. Okay. So I think it depends. And I think part of it is the size of the business and the leadership's appetite for security, right? So from a business perspective, in the larger organizations, and I guess let me backtrack. It really depends on where the CISO is positioned. If they're positioned as like a director or a VP, or even with the C's, right, reporting up there, it makes a big difference on how the company views it, right? So in smaller companies, typically the CISO doesn't have as large of a team, so they're going to need to have that technical background, right? Whereas in large organizations with larger teams, you can rely on your SMEs, which, quite frankly, that's what I like to do, right? The CISO body of knowledge is so large that you cannot be an SME on everything. If you try, you're going to fail. In my opinion, you need to rely on your team, and that's the way I did it, right? I hired people that I trusted and I considered subject matter experts on that particular thing, and then I let them run with it. It's like, okay, here is the goal. This is where we want to go. Okay, put the plan together to help me get there based off your technical knowledge, right? From a CISO's perspective, for me, I need to make sure that I understand, one, the risk appetite of the business, and I think that's one of the most overlooked. Two, business processes. What are the critical things that need to happen, that need to take place on a daily basis for that company to operate, and then develop the controls to protect those, right? That is more business focused. And then to add to that, and back to my comment about being a therapist, I think you really need to know how to get people to work together, how to read people, and quite frankly, play that intermediary, that mediator. I do it on a daily basis where people just have political things going on, and the stay off my land attitude, which is more common than I would like to see, right? And you as a CISO need to bring that together in order to secure the company, in my opinion. And it gets to be a little hard sometimes, right?
What do you think? You talked a lot about like knowing how to motivate people and affect people to work together, to understand, to have a culture that is somewhat security aware. Would you say that's a large part of the CISO role, or is that more of a organization norm almost? Like, okay, if you're at a very small company and you're the first CISO, maybe then you have to build that from scratch. But when you get into a bigger organization, and obviously there's been people before you, how easy or hard is it to get people to understand security matters? I guess is the question.
I think people know it matters, but actually thinking about it is a different animal. I've seen it, I guess, from my point of view. End users tend to think, well, you have security tools, why aren't they catching everything? Right? So they think that the security program should be 100% full. And it's just, that will never happen. Right? And that's one of the bigger hurdles. Where I think companies can improve the security awareness is tying it back to personal, right? If you tie it back to the everyday life, the security awareness training that you're getting here and the things that you do at the company translate back to your personal, right? Take those same steps. It does help, but I think a lot of companies focus too much on the business aspect, and then they like, well, that's personal. I don't want to touch it, right? Because it's going to cost them a little bit extra resource time or something like that, right? So it hits the bottom line. But in my opinion, creating it more on a personal basis will translate more and be more effective to the business and professional, right? Because your business environment is, okay, that's my job, whoopee, right? For better or worse, right? I'll call it like it is, whoopee, it's my job. I can leave that and if something happens, whoopee. Whereas if you focus on personal, they're like, okay, wait a minute, this is going to help me protect my credit card data, all this stuff. I've seen a better return on value with programs focused that way. To circle back on the part about the difficulty of getting people trained, I think you're right. People get into a norm and they just kind of coast, and they tend to think, well, no, it can never happen to me, right? And then business is so fast paced nowadays. Everybody's running, quote unquote, lean and mean. A lot of times it's, okay, you're skimming through an email so quickly, you're not going to see the poor grammar, right? It's just built into us and human nature that misspellings we won't always catch because, we see that first letter, last letter, kind of in our brain works. So that tends to lend itself to mistakes, right? And so it's a tough one. It's a hard one to actually get, something that works for every company is not going to ever be there, right? Each company will be different, and you need to tailor it.
Have you ever been in a company, obviously without any names or anything like that, but at a company that had a serious security incident that you had to handle?
So luckily, not full time. So in my consulting roles, yes. So I've been working, or I have helped companies that have been basically brought completely down by ransomware, in the hundreds of servers, multiple hundreds desktops and things like that. So I have had experience with that. The main thing there is having your incident response plan in place, right? There's always going to be 0 days. You will never detect 100% of everything, right? And to think about that, or to think like that, is putting yourself behind the 8 ball. It's my belief that the response and the detection are key. So actually, response, in my opinion, is number one. You need to ensure that you have everything documented, know what you need to do, what systems are what, and the criticality of those systems. That will help you sleep at night. Okay, if something does happen, my team has their ducks in a row. We can restore, we can mitigate it, right? Now, on the flip side of that, prevention, yes, we always want to prevent and be proactive, but we should never get into the mindset of being 100%. That should never come up in a discussion of security, because you will never be 100% secure.
It's interesting. I think maybe that's one of the things that people who aren't in the security field have a hard time understanding, that like the security people, they can't make it 100% secure. So you do have to sort of play your part as any sort of employee. So I think that's interesting. What do you think is, do you have any tips for people who are in security roles that want to like help impact their other people to understand it better? Because I feel like that's a struggle sometimes in security.
So understanding security better, or
Understanding what they can and can't do and where they aren't safe.
that's a tough one, right? Because there are people that are just don't have an aptitude for security, right? And all people are different, right? You just have people like, for instance, some of my worst offenders in a couple of companies are admins, DBAs with full access rights, and they're constantly coming up as, my worst offenders for phishing. So it's
Oops.
yeah, it's interesting. I think that's a hard one, right? And again, it goes back to boiling down to trying to get them to understand that nothing is 100%, right? Yeah, that's a hard one. I don't have a silver bullet there. I think part of it may be putting some of the onus back onto the people, but that's going to put you in a bad position, in my opinion, right? It's a catch-22. It's my belief that tools do need to evolve, but at the same time, going back to the security awareness, I think we need to revamp how we're approaching security awareness with the enterprise. There's tools out there that are industry standard for security awareness and phishing. I won't say names, but where I think they're failing is they're becoming stagnant. They're not evolving with the times. And it's more focused on the business. So I'm talking to a couple of startups in that space, giving them some advice on, how to improve, what to include, like deep fakes and things like that. Right? Things that are coming out, texting, quishing, phishing, smishing, all of that, right? Putting in those type of campaigns, and again, tying it back to the person, I think is part of it. Yeah, I'm rambling. Sorry.
No, it's great. It's you taking me to the next topic, which is interesting to hear your opinion about. How do you see the whole AI field growing in relation to cybersecurity? Like, what are your opinions about it?
So I think it actually will become a benefit for security. So yes, the bad guys are using it and it's going to help them. But I actually think that it's going to benefit the blue team more so if they utilize it and adopt it. Like, for instance, myself, I've started using it a lot more. And I think part of my plan is, I think companies can leverage it by developing their own LLMs, importing their user behavior, right? So basically, they're going to create their own UEBA, user behavior, and they can tell when somebody's doing something outside the norm using AI, right? So there are companies out there that are doing it and selling it to you for tons of money. But what companies don't realize is like, hey, we could actually do it ourselves, right? Yes, there's an upstart cost to it, but the flip side is you can do things so much quicker. And you build it and you can tailor it to your environment. You send it your alerts, your tools, your policies, right? And then it can come back and say, hey, this person's doing this and it's violating your policy. So that's kind of where I'm working towards. And I think that's going to help the lean and mean shops where they don't have as many security analysts. I think if they switch focus, bring in someone to develop that AI capability, it's going to then offset their lack of security, right? I think it's going to help with that, the lack of junior and security analysts.
Do you think that overall you view using third-party solutions as not as good or maybe even better in certain areas than building your own solutions to things? Like, how do you see it?
So yeah, that really depends. My view, I'd rather do stuff in-house, but it really depends on your business case, right? Not everybody can do it. Third-party solutions are quick solutions, but then you're stuck with what they can do, their capabilities, right? And then oftentimes they may go out of business. You're going to have to pay for maintenance and upkeep. The same can be said for internal development. But what I will say is internal developed apps get a bad rap because they are pushed out so quick and they're not properly documented. A properly documented process or application, in my opinion, is going to be better than going out to a third party, because you're keeping everything, you can tailor to your internal environment, right? The caveat is proper documentation. And I think, in my opinion, that's one of the areas where a lot of companies, and I will say the majority of them, fail. They don't have things properly documented.
I'm going to try giving you I think one of my last podcasts, I was told something that I wonder what you think about, because it's kind of opposing what you're saying, but maybe you see it in a different way. So basically what she said is that if you build things in-house, you're kind of, nobody's gonna maintain them really. Like if you build something and then the people who are on the team who built it, some people got promoted, some people left the company, maybe someone's there but they're working on a new project, and then you kind of have this product that used to be up to date but now sort of isn't, and there's no one who's dealing with it. And then, like, what do you do? Because the other option is just keeping a team forever on that product that you created for yourself, and then you have an inner company team that is building this thing that is probably not doing a as good a job as someone whose whole company is doing that thing. Like, how do you see it? Is that something you agree with? Don't agree?
I can see some of it, but I would disagree. So what that tells me is there's poor planning, right? So in order to develop in-house, I'll go back to my comment about proper documentation and processes. What that person's comment tells me is there was not proper documentation. Most likely they were pushed to develop quickly and promote to production quickly, so they didn't have all their ducks in a row. So it comes down to the money part, right? We are a capitalist society in that everything revolves around money. How can we make the most money for the least amount of effort? If we understand that and come to terms with that, then things start to make sense. Is it the right choice? No. But will it change? No. Right? Because it's all about the money. So that's where CISOs can help themselves, right? From the business perspective. What can we do for the least amount of cost to accommodate, right? Now, going back to the question about developing in-house, I'll say it. I mean, in the case of, maybe talking about development, I'll go back to, MSSPs and SOCs and everything, right? Every company has their own secret sauce. Nobody's the same. And they're only as good as their people, right? So when you go out and do a third-party shop, each one is going to have their pros and their cons. When you bring it in, you're not going to get 100% of what you think you want or It's not going to match 100%. So then what do? You're going to have to fight with that company to update, which ties back to that person, right? They still have to update, and you still have to have people that run those updates, scan for vulnerabilities, and do that, right? You have it on both sides of the fence. My opinion for developing in-house is that's tailored to your environment. You can build it to function the way that you need, and it works, right? Where third party, you're relying on them. If they think it's worth developing, okay. If not, then it's not worth our time. So you're kind of at their behest. So there is, and again, I will also say that it goes based off the size of the company, right? Small businesses probably can't afford an in-house development, and they do have to pull off the shelf, right? But then that ties you back to third-party risk management, which is one of the huge blind spots right now, right? That's, in my opinion, one of the biggest blind spots is third-party risk. And it's still a problem because companies don't want to put the money into it. And that is where, in my opinion, AI can come in, right? You feed all your policies, all of your documentation into your localized or personalized enterprise LLM. Then you can respond to everything. All of it's documented. You can respond to questionnaires that way, all that stuff, and you can build it, right? So that's just my opinion.
Interesting. So you said the third-party risk management, and what do you think is maybe it's third-party risk management, maybe it's something else. What do you think is one of the biggest blind spots CISOs and security people have that you think they should be paying more attention to?
Third-party risk management. So I think a lot of them, they say they're doing it, but I have not seen a fully blown, fully baked third-party risk management on any of my consulting engagements. So that's one that's hard to get buy-in, right? Because you have to have someone that you're paying to sit and herd the cats, so to speak, with your vendors, ensuring that they are secure, answering questionnaires, and all this good stuff. And then you have to trust them, right? So, for instance, I relate this back to insurance, cyber insurance. So when you're going through your cyber insurance and you're answering all these thousands of questions, the cyber insurance doesn't come back and validate, right? They trust you at your word, and there's a reason behind that, right? Because if something happens, then what? Oh, well, let me see what you showed me, prove it. And then if you can't prove it, then they're not going to pay your claim, right? So it kind of ties back to that, in my opinion.
What do you think they should do?
There needs to be a definite process in place. There needs to be more focus put on that in the highly regulated environments, right? I mean, I think the business types also play a role into that, right? If you're not in a highly regulated environment, you might not need as much, and that's where the risk comes in. The risk appetite, developing the risk tolerance, risk appetite, and then mapping your controls back to that, right? And then keeping that risk register as well, right? Getting the sign off, the CYA, I like to call it. So my risk register has sign-offs based off the business owner, right? It's like, okay, that's fine. It's the CISO's responsibility to bring up the risk and bring it up, present it. And that's like, okay, do we want to accept it? Do we want to do this, right? But the CISO shouldn't be accepting the risk. It's the business and the business owners.
What do you think is the biggest challenge right now in the cybersecurity field?
The biggest challenge, I think, is probably awareness. I think all of the publicity is a double-edged sword because we're getting the visibility, but at the same time, it's becoming the norm. so it doesn't matter anymore. So a while ago, let's take Target, the big ones, right? Everybody talks about Target and Best Buy and all of these. And it used to be, okay, you're going to take a reputational hit. No. Okay, yes, you got breached. Everybody accepts it nowadays, right? Look at Target, look at all those. Their stock are right back up. Everybody, CrowdStrike, everybody's, they didn't get the ransom. But, the reputational damage doesn't make a difference nowadays. And we're becoming numb to it almost. So it's went from no visibility to almost too much now, right? So it's that's a tough one to answer. I just take the facts and go with the facts, right? And you have to make your decision based off of that. Educate the people and just do the best you can.
Interesting. What would you say are the frustrating things about cybersecurity?
Frustrated things about security.
Unless there's none.
Everything? No. Some of the frustrating things is, again, it goes back to the comment about everybody thinks you have to be 100% secure. And then if you have an incident or something like that, then it's the security team's fault, right? Ultimately, it boils up to the CEO, COO, right? And the folks that make the decisions to provide resources or not, right? And that's kind of what it boils down to.
What would you say is something, okay, if you were talking to someone who wants to get into the security field, what are the things you suggest they think about or do in the process of getting maybe their first job after college, maybe more of a, they've been doing something else and they want to switch? Like, should they do something else and then switch? Like, how do you see it?
So, getting into cybersecurity, that's a good one, right? I think part of it is knowing yourself, knowing what you like to do, and then focusing on that, right? Getting into security is such a big field. There's a lot of different areas that they can focus on, right? And you have to love what you do, because security is typically seen as a roadblock. So you also need to have the interpersonal skills, right? And I think that is where a lot of security-minded people, I don't want to say fail, but could improve, right? You need to be able to talk terms and talk to the CEO, and then go back and talk to a level 1 analyst, and then talk to someone in the business, like your finance person, and explain things to them. So you need to talk to all levels of the organization. That's key, right? Interpersonal skills is one of the things that I think is very key, especially for a CISO. Maybe not so much for an analyst, but for a CISO, 100%. Emotional intelligence as well, right? Knowing how you're going to act in certain situations, being able to control those emotions when a high stress situation comes up. Because, speaking from my experience, right, if you do get breached, right, how are you going to handle that? Is it going to be the sky is falling, or are you comfortable with your team and your plans, and that you can just start rolling with that, call your war room, do whatever you need to do, right? Yeah.
How do you deal with the stress of always being on? Like, you're always prepared for something to happen.
Hobbies. You have to have a hobby. Also setting boundaries. So yes, in the security and the CISO, you're available 24/7, or you need to be, right, because of incidents. But at the same time, you have to be able to say no. And you have to be able to discern between, okay, is this truly a P1, right? Is this user ID approval have to be done at 1 a.m. in the morning because you forgot to, put it in the system and they're starting tomorrow type of thing, right? Setting boundaries and realistic expectations is there. And then also just taking time for yourself. I don't do it. I'll be honest, I don't do it enough. But I've started to. I've started to take a lot more time and putting in those guardrails for, okay, guys, I hate saying to the CEO, put in a ticket or no, but I have. I have, right? And part of that is ensuring that, you have that buy-in and everything from the top down. And I think that's very important. And that's part of the reason why I push back, right? Far too often you get a lot of the upper execs saying, just do what I say type of thing, right? And that leads to the liability on the back end. So.
Interesting. Do you think, actually, I'll ask a different question. What do you think made you like security that much and also want to move around? Because your expertise is, it's very varied. Like, you've done a lot of different things in different companies, and like, what made you decide to do that versus super niching down into a specific field and then bringing other people who, do different things or do something else completely? Like, what motivated you?
So for me, my goal back in the day was always a CISO. So that was my goal. Quite frankly, I wanted to run the program because I thought I could do it a lot better than it was being done. I mean, I don't toot my own horn, but that is the honest answer of why I got into it. I see things going, I'm like, what's going on? Why are you doing that? It makes zero sense. So whether that was the right way or not, that's why I did it. The main reason why I moved around goes back to my comment about, getting that breadth of knowledge. The CISO has to know a little bit about everything. I will equate it to the CISSP certification. So everybody says the CISSP is 10 miles wide and only 2 inches deep, right? And that's what a CISO, in my opinion, needs to do. The CISO should have the overall knowledge to say, okay, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right. I think you're BSing me. Or can we do this, right? The CISO that goes in and does the bits, the bytes, the coding, the scripting, in my opinion, is more the small business CISO, where the CISO is the IT person with maybe one person beneath, right? I purposely jumped around, like I said, because I wanted to get a little bit of knowledge in everything. And again, you're not going to be able to transfer from a security analyst to a risk management job in the same company. They're going to be like, what are you talking about? Why are we going to move you from the security team over to the risk team to get risk management experience and type of things? So I did that to get that knowledge. Also for me, the niche, as you could probably tell based off of, the way I'm talking and stuff here, I have the shiny penny syndrome. So I don't do well doing a monotonous, the same thing all day. I like to do something for a little bit and then move around. That's just my personality. So it fit me better. And I think that's why I do well at a CISO at the thought leader level, in that I like to hop around, touch things. Okay, where are we at with this type of thing, and then build it. I just wanted to own it as well, because I think, I could do a better job, and I think I have, right? I haven't been at a company that's been breached while I was there, so to say. Knock on wood.
Exactly.
But, now that I say that, I'll be in trouble. But yeah, for lack of a better term, that is, that's why I moved around. And then also, no company does everything the same way. Going from the consulting world, where I've helped and worked at hundreds of companies, I can see things that work and things that didn't work. And I bring that to the table. And that's how I answer that question when I'm in a job. It's like, okay, where can you find someone that has the background that can talk, intelligibly to a lot of different areas of the organization, both at a technical and a business level, where they've been at the same company their entire career. It's, they're unicorns. They exist. Yes, there's always an exception. I'm not saying they don't, but they're very few and far between.
So we're at the last question. And
Okay.
Thank you so much for your time. I think this has been really interesting to just hear the way you think about all the different aspects of security and what is actually important for someone who's especially a CISO. And my last question sort of ties into that. So how do you see not cybersecurity as a whole, but specifically the CISO role progressing as time moves on? Like, do you think the CISO role is going to stay pretty much, the way it is? Or do you see it evolving, changing? What do you think the more business side people should think about when interacting with the CISO, the tech people? Like, how does it progress from here?
So I know a lot of people think that CISOs are going to become CEOs. I could maybe see that in some larger organizations. I don't see that in the smaller organizations. I sort of see the opposite. What I see now is a lot of checkbox CISOs, unfortunately, because with the visibility of all the ransomware that we have gotten, and everybody says, okay, we need security, they bring in a CISO, quote unquote, by title, but yet they don't give them the authority and the tools that they need to actually do the CISO job, right? It's more of a checkbox. I still see that for a number of years. I don't see, I'll be honest, I don't really see a lot of CISOs going to the board level or the C level currently. Until fines or something else are put in place, or something's put in place to make it more, make it required. So it goes back to the comment about, I've actually been told this by a couple of different companies that I've been at, is I'm not going to do that until I get a breach and I get fined. We're just not going to do it. And that, in my opinion, will stay until we have some better oversight or controls or more punishment for that. And I don't think it should be the CISO's responsibility. The CISO is responsible for, in my opinion, telling the business their risks. So businesses then have to accept it. So why is the CISO on the hook when the CEO is the one ultimately making that decision, right? So I think there needs to be penalties, not just for the CISO, that has to go up, right? Granted, if the CISO is negligent, it can be proven, that's fine. But more often than not, it's not the CISO's negligence. It's the fact that they don't get the buy-in from the top and they're told no, right? So long story short, that was a long-winded answer. I think, some companies, the bigger ones, yes, they will grow and move the CISO and get more cybersecurity expertise in the board, but most will not. That's my prediction. For better or worse, I'm the more realistic person, right? Yeah.
We need those.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. I think that was one of the most interesting things also that we talked about today, like the where it is right now, where it should or could go. So I think we're gonna have to do another episode in like 5 years and see what happens.
All for it. Yeah. No, I'd be happy to. I'd see where it goes from here. See how bad my predictions are, or how right. You never know, right?
Perfect. Okay, well, thank you so much for your time, Mark, and thank you for everything you said.
Yeah, no problem, and I appreciate the platform, and yeah, reach out if you need somebody else or need someone to speak again.